So as we continue our title slide, so this gives you a context of where we're at, the timeline of where we were 701 BC when Sennacherib and the Assyrians assaulted Jerusalem, failing at the doorstep. And then we're now talking about Israel being taken captive into Babylon. And it's predictive prophecy that Isaiah is making here. So Babylon demolished Jerusalem there in 586. And then 50 years later, Cyrus decrees the return to Judah. So you can see here in the verses, God is calling to comfort, and then he makes a legal case to deliver his people, and then we're waiting in hope. And that's what we talked about the last couple weeks. And now we're into God making his case before the court and addressing his people and calming Israel, his servant. And the commentators see this section of Isaiah is repeating the similar message with very increasing specificity, as it says. We're going to cover chapter 41 through 42 over this week and next, and then we'll go through the remaining cases. And he really right now is just starting a challenge to idol worshipers to present their best case that their gods are divine. And we know that they're going to fail at that. And we see the first section here, which we're calling today, 41, 1 through 20, and then next week, the end of chapter 41 through chapter 42, verse 9. So who's calling? Who's speaking, and what is the call? And God is speaking here, and he's calling all the nations. He's calling all the world from the farthest points to come together to listen and be a part of the case. And then he goes in verses 2 and 3, he is referring to, most likely referring to Cyrus, the king of Persia, who conquers Babylon. And we'll see that in later chapters, that he actually calls him out by name. And God has orchestrated all these events because he is God. And he is showing that he has been clearly working behind the scenes in everything that's happened. And, you know, he says, I'm calling out the generations from the beginning. And he's really evoking through the course of history, he's been in charge, and he has been monitoring what is happening on the earth and putting his hand in and protecting Israel and calling out Israel from long ago when from Jacob back to Abraham and then forward. He called them forth and they became his. So how do the nations, the islands, respond to these events? Well, they come and they watch in fear. And it talks about making the idols, and they're trying to, the idol makers are trying to encourage one another as they're going through the process. And they're putting the idol together and fastening it in place so it doesn't fall over and move away. But what are those gods able to do? They're able to do absolutely nothing. They are made up. They are created by man, and they cannot do anything to help and support. You know, and God is making the point through Isaiah to Israel that don't trust in the idols, don't trust in the false gods of these other countries around you, because they can't save them. They can't do anything, and there's no redemption through them. And then he turns to Israel, and you know, what is the meaning of servant here? It's used a whole bunch of times there in the Old Testament, 68 times, and servant means chosen. You know, he is Israel is God's chosen people. and they are his servant. And the mission is to serve God. Their mission is to be a light to the nations, such that they can testify of God and his ability to protect and provide. And his message to the captives, verse 9, he says, I chose you. I won't forget you, and I will bring you back. And he is encouraging them. Remember, this is written 100 years before they go into captivity. And so he's telling them, you're going to go into captivity, but I won't forget you, and I will bring you back. And it's to be a message of calmness and soothing to them. And verse 10, he says, don't be afraid. It's a constant theme of anyone who meets God. We see it anytime someone meets an angel, or anytime someone meets a theophany of Jesus Christ. The first thing out of the angels or the incarnation of Jesus is, don't be afraid, because that's the first thing that comes to our mind. And these captives are afraid that God has forgotten them, that he's just going to leave them, and that he's going to punish them because of how they behaved towards him, and they were ashamed. And so they were afraid that he'd abandoned them in captivity. But he pledges to bring them back. He pledges that he is the ultimate protection, not the idols, not the false gods. The gods of Babylon did not beat God, the God of Israel, to allow them to go into captivity. God allowed it. So God is promising his ultimate protection. His message to the captives is, fear not, I will provide you a redeemer. And that redeemer will bring you out. And so this is kind of a near-term and long-term prophecy, as we've talked about in the past. I'm going to provide you a redeemer who's going to bring you out. I'm going to provide you a redeemer that will provide for your sins and take care of you. And ultimately, he's talking about the Messiah, who is Jesus Christ. Why is Jacob called a worm? Well, Jacob was a deceiver. There are times that Jacob had given up on God, and he had to be turned back. His faith was called into question several times. So he is called a worm because he does that. He had to be brought back. He was very low in how he does. And God's going to make them like a threshing sledge. Well, that's a device that's used to separate the chaff from the grain. And it's a pretty nasty machine when pulled by oxen, and you don't want to be caught underneath of it, because it will make a mess of you. And I think we've got a picture coming up here. So you've got the person standing on the sledge as the oxen are pulling it. And so what you see in these other two pictures are what that sledge actually looks like. And it's a piece of wood with rock and bone and sharp things pushed into it to break up the chaff. And so if you got ridden over by that, it would slice you and dice you into many, many pieces. And so Isaiah finishes this section by God reminding the captives that whatever you seek, I will provide. He talks about them seeking water and needing water. He goes, I will provide. He says, I won't forsake you. I will turn the desert into a garden even, and you will see my power. And he gives them that message because they're captive in Babylon. They're discouraged, and they think that God's forgotten them. And he's saying, no, that's not what's going to happen. I didn't forget you. I won't leave you there. So don't be discouraged. I put you there. I will bring you out. I am capable of overcoming the false gods of Babylon, whom the Babylonians thought that their gods were triumphant. which is why the people go into captive. And that's not the case, and God is making that to his people Israel. A couple of applications, God versus the idols. And what are some idols we set up on our lives? And we set up things in our lives that really distract us from God. And that's what idols are. In those days, an idol was a created thing that you would bow down and worship. And in our day and age, we don't tend to do that, but we tend to pursue things like power and money and material things. And those become idols as we pursue after those things before we even pursue God. And that's what makes them bad. It's not that having material things, having money, having a job with power and authority is bad, but it's when we exclude God out of our lives and we turn that pursuit into the all-encompassing of our being. That's what makes it an idol, and really what turns it into a bad thing. And how do we know truth or find the meaning of life? Well, we do that not from inside the system that what these idols would and the ancients would consider the cosmos. If we pray to the cosmos or karma gives us good or bad based on our behavior. But no, we find meaning and truth through the revelation of God and through his word. And he has revealed himself both through creation as well as through his written word. And he is, as it says, broken into this world and is a witness to himself. He wants to use his servants to re-engage with the world. And we are his modern servants. It's not just Israel, but it is all believers in Jesus Christ who are his servants. And we need to be engaged in his word so that we can live that out and share that gospel with those around us. And fear. Do we live in a world of fear today? Well, certainly we do. With coronavirus and racial divides, that's causing fear. And it's causing fear because we're not trusting in God to provide and protect us. We need to rely on him and understand that he has a plan for us and that he will be able to protect us and take care of us and provide for us throughout whatever is happening, because he gives us peace of mind. And as even as we lay on our deathbed, we can have that peace of mind that we're going to him. There are bad things that can happen to us in the world, but ultimately we go to Jesus and we go to God, and he provides and protects us. His message is the same as it was to Isaiah's time. Do not fear. You're not alone. I've not forgotten you. I am with you. And that is true. And he has given us, I like that, he has given us the dignity of sharing his own image. We are made in God's image. And not just the physical soul, spirit, and body, but, we have that triune part of us, and he has made us in his image, and he loves us, and he wants us to serve him, and he has called us to do so. So that ends this week's lesson. Join us next week. If you want to join us live, we're at 8:30. Otherwise, you can catch up on the YouTube site shown there. So thanks so much.